So founder calls me and he's like, hey, I've got this head of product. I've interviewed him. I've done references. I think he's a great fit. I want to hire him. What do you think? This is a founder that I've been working with for many years. We're investors in the startup. And he's one of the founders that I work more closely with, right? Like there's, ultimately different styles and for different reasons. I work more closely with some founders than others. He's one that I work pretty closely with. And I knew he was looking for a head of product, but I hadn't seen like this particular candidate or heard about him or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Like send me some information. So he sends me an email, kind of like strengths and weaknesses. He says, this guy, we'll call him Joe. Joe is, strong leadership, UX focus. He's creative. He's disruptive. He can easily kind of report to the board on product, lead product decisions. His weaknesses is he might move too fast without like considering other aspects of the business. I'm literally like reading the email, by the way. Culture fit wise, he's more aggressive than the current team, but that could really like spice things up and get us moving faster. But the con is he could come over as abrasive, and his comp is $180,000. So this would be like the most expensive person that we've hired this company so far. And it's a critical role because the company's doing very well. It's got product market fit. It's over $2 million in revenue. But a lot of the challenges that the company has are around product, around bugs, around different integrations not working exactly as they should. And so this head of product is a critical role. And the founder tells me, we don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to make a decision by the end of the day because this guy, Joe, he's got an offer from Shopify that's going to expire either today or tomorrow. I don't remember exactly. And so we need to get back to him. So I'm obviously a little bit taken aback because it's hard to make a decision that fast, especially when like you haven't even, spoken to the candidate. But he tells me, the other VC, he's met the candidate. He thinks really highly of him. And I know that other VC really well, and I trust him and his judgment of people. He also tells me that he did 2 references. He did a reference with the founder and CEO of the company that Joe is currently at, and the CEO of the company that he was at previously. And both references went really well. So as I'm talking to him, I'm kind of like just checking out his profile. And I start noticing some things that are like a little bit weird. Like, for example, his LinkedIn profile, he doesn't have a picture. That's a little weird, but, whatever. I start reading about his current role, and he says he had this company that, he put out a product, and that product's doing like $30 million in revenue a year. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. This guy, in his profile, he's worked at Google, he's worked at Facebook. He's got a pretty rock solid profile. But, I decided to check out his last company. And so I click it, and I see there's only like, 6 profiles associated with it on LinkedIn, which is a little weird for a company that's supposedly doing over like $30 million. I check out the website, and honestly, the website looks like I built it on Wix. And you don't want me building websites. And so, like, that's a little weird, especially from somebody who's going to be like head of product, a VP product. Should probably have a sick website. So I'm saying this to the founder. The founder's like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. Obviously, this founder's got a million different things to do. This is one of the things he's doing. Yeah, it's high priority, but he's meeting a lot of different candidates. He's trying to move fast. And so, not every single kind of I is going to get dotted, every T going to get crossed. And so, that's fine. I keep kind of like looking through his profile, and I noticed that he was VP product at a startup where I know the founder. So I tell this founder, I'm like, hey, let me just like reach out to this guy kind of backdoor and just see what he thinks. And I reach out to him and I just say, hey, like, can we have a quick reference call? We're looking to hire Joe, and I know he worked for you, so just curious to hear what you think. And I get an auto reply being like that he's on out of the country or on vacation. I'm like, okay, probably won't hear back. But then literally minutes later, I get this email, and he says, hey, Pablo, I'll save myself 15 minutes and your startup 2 months of severance. Don't hire Joe. He changes his name online regularly, sometimes goes by, and he kind of provides some other names that I won't share here, and he's dishonest about his past experience. In a loose definition of fraud, he would fit the criteria. And then he shared a LinkedIn post of somebody else that he had given this person's name as a reference, and this person had found out because the person doing the reference check had then messaged her privately asking for follow-up questions, but then she realized she never had a call with this person. And it turns out that he gave her name and then had somebody else impersonate her as part of the reference. So obviously, like when the founder told me that he spoke with the reference of, the founder of his current company and the CEO of the company before that, those in all likelihood were fake references. So I share this with the founder and I say, hey, like, do you have the emails of the people you spoke to? He's like, no, I just got the phone numbers. So bottom line, it was all fraud. Like 100% of it was a fraud. And obviously, we didn't hire this candidate. I share this story because obviously, like, it's just a crazy story. But in a sense, like, what that proves, it's the exception. I mean, fraud obviously happens, but it's not that common. And that's why when these stories, happen to you, you're just like, for me, it was just so shocking because I'm like, holy shit, I just hadn't never seen like a person, especially for a role like this at an early stage startup, go out and just like, fake their entire career and then provide fake references and all those sort of things. What really struck me, so that like to me tells me, again, like founders have to be careful because fraud happens. But that wasn't the biggest takeaway for me. The biggest takeaway is actually that this guy interviewed exceptionally well. This interview blew away this founder, and he'd interviewed other people in the company. And some of them had like some suspicions about it, but overall, he interviewed exceptionally well. And I think what that really highlights is that there are many people who are very good at interviewing. And just because somebody's really good at interviewing, this goes for people committing fraud and those that don't, right? And it applies much more in the latter case because there's a lot of people out there that will interview exceptionally well, and then they will be exactly mediocre at the job. And that's the thing that for a founder, you really have to watch out for. And I would go a step further and to say the only thing you know for sure about a candidate who's got logos, because a lot of time, that's kind of the thing we go for. We look on the paper and we see, okay, they've worked at Google. Oh, they worked at Facebook. They must be great. The only thing you know for sure about a candidate who works at Google or worked at Facebook or Shopify or whatever, name your big company, is that they interview exceptionally well. Because those interview processes, I know people that have gone through it, they are a high bar. They're really hard to get through. But the only thing you really know is that they got through that, and that's why they work there. It's just like many other things, like med school is the same. It's so hard to get into med school. But once you're in, it's actually quite hard to fail. And these big companies are many times kind of like that. There's exceptions, obviously, but as a rule, they're really hard to get into. And once you get into, it's really hard to fail. Even if you're just okay, you probably won't get fired. You have to either do something bad or like be really bad at your job. And so the point is, relying just on interviews as the biggest thing to determine who you're going to put inside of your team as an early stage founder can be a huge mistake. So what can you do about it? Well, like the same founder has somebody for a different role that they're looking at. And he said to me that this person that they're looking to hire has worked with somebody else on his team for a long time. And I'm like, to me, that's all that matters. If you have somebody you trust who knows that person, not just because of an interview or they met a couple times, but has worked with that person and thinks highly of him or thinks highly of her, then that's the candidate you want to hire, because there's a huge difference between interviewing somebody once, twice, 3 times and working with somebody for months or years in terms of the likelihood that that person is going to do well in your company. So that's the first thing you can do, is hiring people based on referrals. The second thing is you have to do backdoor reference checks. And obviously, when you're getting references from the candidate themselves, make sure it's an actual email, not just a phone number. If somebody's saying that they worked at company X, make sure you're getting the email address of that reference and it's at x.com and not at gmail.com or Hotmail. That's just like an easy way to make sure you're talking to the person you think you're talking to. But more important than that is everybody's always going to cherry pick the references they give you. Go through the profile and find a way to do at least 1 or 2 backdoor reference checks. And that can be because you know the person, you know the CEOs or founders or managers of those other companies because your investors do, or even if you have to reach out cold or find a mutual intro, but that's worth the time, especially for more important hires, for leaders in your company. It's worth doing every single time. It'll take longer at first, but it can save you a lot down the road. And the last thing I'll say, and this is a big bias of mine, but I think early stage founders have to hire a lot more former founders than they do. I think in general, it's really easy to be impressed by logos, but the reality is they don't mean as much as you think they do. But somebody who started their own startup, and especially if they had any amount of success, even if the company ultimately failed, but they were able to get some actual revenue, have some customers, raise some money. It wasn't just like they were an entrepreneur. They actually were legitimately a founder. That's a person who's willing to take risks. That's a person who's going to be a self-starter, who's not going to need to be managed, who's going to be able to own something, who's going to have that kind of attitude of, I'm the owner of this area and not just I'm an employee. How do I get a salary bump, or how do I position myself to not get fired? These sort of things that a lot of times the bureaucratic kind of thinking that spreads in big organizations, former founders tend to not think those ways. And so at the early stages, when you don't have time to manage your head ofs, you need them to just be running independently. but while you need some specialization, you don't need complete spears that are only excellent at their one function because things are just not that structured yet. And so having somebody who has an edge in marketing, but was a former founder, has an edge in finance, but was a former founder, in my opinion, those are some of the best profiles you want to hire from. I just gave you content that you liked so much, you actually listened to the end. And guess what? You didn't pay a single dollar. Not only that, I didn't even put any ads in your face. So you just got a bunch of content for free. And now that I've delivered that value, I'm asking for something in return. Open your app, open Apple Podcasts, open Spotify, open whatever app you use to listen to this, and hit that follow button. It's actually going to help you because it's going to help you make sure you don't miss out on the next episode, which you like so much that you listen to the whole thing.